Welcome to Blonde Cards and Crafts. Let's make something together. Hello, welcome to my channel, Blonde Cards and Crafts. Today we're going to make 10 cards and I'm going to be using this fabulous kit. It's the Love from Lizi January 2021 card kit. It's a beautiful kit, so why not sit back, relax and enjoy my video. So our first card is going to be an easel card, and I have my card base here on my scoreboard. This card base measures 12 by 6, and I'm making the card base myself, so I've scored it at 6 and I'm scoring it again at 9. We're going to burnish these score lines into a mountain fold and again into another mountain fold, and this is the base that's going to support the easel part of our card. So this is the part that's going to sit up on our card, or the easel part, and there are three mats or layers to this part. So I have my base, and this measures 6 by 6. Then I have a matte layer here in pink, and this measures 5 3/4 by 5 3/4. And I have some pattern paper here, and this measures 5 1/2 by 5 1/2. I've stamped out this lovely happy birthday sentiment, and it's one of the stamps in the woodware collection, and I'll leave links for everything that I can find or that are in stock down below. I've stamped it in this Memento Toffee Crunch ink, and then what I've done is I've gone over it with some clear embossing powder so it has a shine on it, and I'm going to put some foam tape behind that. I'm going to glue down my little bow that I've made from ribbon from the kit. So that'll all sit onto this part of the front or the base of our card, and it'll sit up like so. So now I have some mats and layers that'll sit down here on our card. Okay, so this pink layer measures 5 3/4 by 5 3/4, and this white layer measures 5 1/2 by 5 1/2, and I've stamped my sentiment there already. I have this offcut which is 5 1/2 by 1 inch, and I'm going to put that over to the side to embellish that. Now I've stamped a rather large sentiment on this, which is okay by me because I'm going to have my little flower ephemera piece, which will be the stopper. I'm going to have that quite high up, so you'll get to see the whole lot of the stamp sentiment down there, and that's a spot that you can write your message to whoever the card is going to. So as usual, I've sped everything up and I'm going to glue down all my mats and layers. Now you've probably noticed that this is a long video. It's 10 cards and it's just over 49 minutes long, but I'm making some cards. I'm making a Wreath card, I'm making a Slimline card, a Peekaboo card, a corner fold card. So some of these take a little bit longer to make, but you can always just watch up to whatever point on the video you like and press stop, and you can come back and watch it then at another time. We're all in lockdown at the moment, so I kind of was debating whether I'd cut it into 2 videos, but I felt that it's just as easy for people to stop where they want and then come back to it at another time, and I didn't want to take too much out of the video. There are a couple of cards in here where I have edited out the sticking down the mats and layers and sticking them onto the card in places because I felt you really didn't need it. Now I've gone through all that here with this card so you can see, but I hope that you still enjoy the video, and maybe next time I might just do 5 cards. So tell me what you think down in the description down below. Leave a comment and let me know, do you prefer a video that's long cut up into 2 videos, or would you just prefer one shorter video? Anyway, we've gotten to the end of our Wreath card and I'm just embellishing it now with some of the lovely enamel dots. These are glittery enamel dots that came in the kit, and that is card 1, our easel card. Card number 2 is a Wreath card, and I watched a fantastic tutorial by Sam from Mixed Up Crafts, and I'll leave links down in the description. But I'm going to use some distress ink from my stash as well as a blending brush. I'm going to use the stencil that came in the kit, and the ephemera and a stamp from the kit. So I have some of these strips here. I have some acetate, and this acetate is about 1/2 inch wide, and I'm going to put that onto the frame, and it's going to have our sentiment on it, so it looks like as if it's floating midair. So my frames that I've used are some hunky-dory oval frames, and again, you can find links down below. So I have taken 2 of the regular dies. So you can see this nested set has got regular and it's got scalloped edged. I've taken 2 of the regular edge to make 1 frame, and then I've taken a regular edge and a scalloped edged one to make the white frame, and then I've layered those 2 onto each other just to give it a little bit of a different look from just your standard frame. Now I want to cut out this piece here, and I'm going to again use the oval die to do that, and I'll be cutting through the 2 layers of my card. This is a little circle that I have punched out. It's a 2 1/4 inch circle, and I've stamped my Miss You and used some of the ephemera, and I'm going to embellish the frame with some of the ephemera here as well. And I may not use it all, but I just have it all there so I can use whatever I like on it. I've also made a little bow from ribbon that came in the kit, and I will stick that on using some hot glue. So this is my card base. It measures 8 by 6, and I've scored it on the long side at 4. And now what I want to do is I want to use the stencil with my Distress ink and my blending brush. Now the Distress ink that I have used is Milled Lavender. It's a lovely pale purple kind of color, and I thought the purples and pinks went nicely together. And I'm using some washi tape to hold down my stencil onto my card base. Perfect. Okay, so I have my frame on the card base where I think I would like it to be situated, and I've put the die down so I have an idea. Now I don't want anything to go above the height of 6 inches. So from the bottom of the card to the top of my frame, allowing for a bit of ephemera, it needs to be within a 6 inch. That way I'll have a 6 by 6 card. So I have my die in place, and I'm going to pop this through my Gemini machine, and it's brilliant. I use the Gemini Junior plates on my Gemini machine, so it goes through quicker, but it cuts through 2 layers, and this is a 300 GSM card that I used. Okay, so my acetate can either go across from left to right, or I can put it at the bottom and have the Miss You floating up like a lollipop, but I'm going to go from left to right with my acetate. I'm also going to take the strips and I'm going to put them along the side here. It's just to pull in the color from the frame to my card base, and I've cut them intentionally long. That way I can trim them off with the scissors, and I know they're going to be a perfect fit. Even though our card base is 4 inches tall, sometimes, you know, if you cut it on your card on a trimmer and then you bring it up, sometimes I find the strips can be a teeny bit short or a teeny bit long. So that's what I do. I'm also going to add some of the peel-offs that came in the kit, and these are a lovely, lovely colored peel-off. Perfect. So now I'm going to adhere my Miss You sentiment onto my acetate, and whenever I'm sticking anything to acetate, I like to use a red liner or a really sticky double-sided tape. And I know with this red liner tape that if I go to pull this Miss You off, it's going to just, it'll be really hard to do that. Okay, so excuse my head popping into frame there a couple of times. I'm just deciding where I want the ephemera. And I feel 2 ephemera, one at the top and one to the bottom left-hand side, is enough. I'm also going to take some of the enamel dots and add them to the front. Now we're swiftly moving on to card number 3, and you can see I have all the pieces out here, our card base, our mats and our layers. The grey card there I've embossed using an embossing folder, and I've die cut out 3 circles, and I've used some of the cards from the kit as well as the ephemera. This card is fairly simple. So here we are at card number 4, and I've handmade that pattern paper myself. But the card base is a 12 by 6 card base, and you scored at 6, and this is a ready-made card base that I have here. I've also got some gold card that I'm going to use as a matte layer, and this piece measures 5 3/4 by 5 3/4. I have some patterned paper. I've made this myself using stamps from the kit. This piece measures 5.5 by 5.5, and I'll be showing you how I did that. This is one of the letters from the kit, and I have rubbed the edge of the vellum around the Versamark. I've dipped it in my gold embossing powder, just showing you there how I did that, and then I used my heat gun to melt that. The gold that I'm using is Cosmic Shimmer. Now, Lizi does great embossing powders. I don't have a gold one by her, so I've used this. I also have an embossing pen. Have you seen these? These are brilliant. I used this, I dotted it around the letter, and then I dipped it in my gold embossing powder, and it put these lovely little dots on the vellum and around the letter A. So I'm really pleased with that. I also took some of the ephemera, and again I rubbed the edge through the Versamark pad, dipped it in my gold powder, and then heat embossed that. And I did that with the two of these ephemera that I have here. I think that looks really cool. It's different, you know. Anyway, yeah. So there we go. I'm going to put one of these on the top left hand corner and one on the bottom right hand corner, and that's why those corners weren't finished with the gold embossing powder on the vellum. I have a little strip here left over of the patterned paper. This gold piece of card, it measures 1 inch by 5 3/4, and then the patterned paper is 3/4 of an inch by 5.5. I've also stamped my sentiment, and this is a happy birthday stamp from the kit. What I did was I stamped my happy birthday first, then I took one of the little leaf stamps in the kit and I stamped around the happy birthday. I gold embossed those, and then I used my heat tool on those. Once I had that, I cut my happy birthday sentiment to size. Then I took that and I rubbed it through my Versamark sticky ink. I put some more gold embossing powder on that and then heat set that. And that's how I came up with that sentiment. So I'm fairly happy with how this card looks and the layout of the card. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I made the patterned paper. And I'm going to show you how I took the stamp onto some white card using the Versamark ink, then how I put some gold embossing powder over that and heat set that, and then used my Distress Oxide inks. So here's everything I have that I'm going to need for this. I'm using the lovely large floral stamp that came in the kit, and I have a little white sheet of card. What I did was I laminated that, and I use that when I'm doing any kind of inking. I find that it helps to keep my desk tidy. So I have an EK Success tool there, and I've opened the bottom of it so I could put some of the powder down on my paper. And then I have that big blending brush. It's just a cheap blending brush that I got in my local Pennies or Primark. So now I'm going to stamp down the lovely floral image, and I'm stamping it randomly around my page. I'm turning the stamp as well, so I'm not stamping it the same way in the same direction all over the page. I want it to look random. So I'm making sure that I am stamping it in different directions. Now I can see on the paper where I've previously stamped. It's like a sticky white layer. So I'm very careful I don't overlap any of my stamping. So there's the gold embossing powder on top. I'm just getting a little flake or two off there where I didn't want it. And I have poured the embossing powder onto a piece of copy paper or photocopy paper. Put it back into its little jar, and then I'm going to continue on. I'm taking another one of the little stamps in the stamp set, I'm going to use one of the sprigs as well as one of the teeny tiny flowers. Now I didn't use my heat gun on this yet. I'm being very careful that I don't brush my sleeve or my hand off the embossing powder, because if you touch off it at all, it'll move. So be very careful when you're doing that. Okay, now I'm using the teeny tiny little flower and I'm going to fill in those open spaces all around. Again, I'm putting some embossing powder on that. I'm going to tap off all the excess. Don't blow it because you'll blow powder off. Just tap, tap, tap back into its little tub and then put the lid on. Always put the lid on before you bring your heat gun to the table, because a waft of that and your powder will go everywhere. So here's the magic, and I hope you can see it. This fabulous embossing powder, and it's heating up, going to a liquid and going so beautiful gold. I love this process. It's one of the things I saw when I first started card making, and it really, I think that was what set me on this journey. Seeing someone, I think it was Jennifer McGuire, doing heat embossing, and I just thought, wow, that is amazing. I want to have a go at that. And sure, I got the few bits to do that, and here I am today doing videos and everything. But sure, I do it for myself because I enjoy it. Okay, so I have my Distress Oxide and it's Faded Jeans, and I'm going to blend that all over my page. Now, don't worry, because we've heated our embossing powder, so it's going to resist the actual ink. So when I have my Faded Jeans ink all over my card and I don't want a seamless blend, you can see there it's a little bit hit and miss, I'm going to wipe over it with a cloth, a dry cloth, and I'm going to take off the excess ink that's sitting on top of the embossing, and that way then it'll look lovely and crisp. I put some water into my hands and dropped a few little drops over the front and pressed it with, again, my cloth. And now I'm going to cut my paper to size. Once I have my paper cut, my panel to the size I want, I'm then going to go around the edge with a darker ink, and the darker ink I'll use is Chipped Sapphire. And I think this just brings, you know, the whole thing to life. Now, most people that do this, you'll see sometimes they'll add a third color. And I debated adding, I was thinking walnut stain or one of those around the edges to kind of darken it again. But I liked it with just these two colors. So the Chipped Sapphire, I'm going to blend it all around the edge, and I'm going to blend heavy around the edge of the card and then lighten my hand as I move inwards. So the center of the panel will be much lighter compared to the edges of our panel. And the center of the panel is going to be covered by our letter A that we've gold embossed as well. So that's how to do a emboss resist panel. Now you can see I had some ink there. What I did was I sprayed it and I picked it up with an offcut of paper, because you know what, that'll make a lovely watercolor panel for a different card. So there you go, that's our beautiful gold embellished standard 6x6 card. And now we're moving on to a slimline card, and for this card I have shortened the whole video. You can see here I have an oval panel I've die cut out, and I've die cut out the letter T using a die. I have put a cream matte layer and a strip of cream across the bottom. I've put a die cut thank you on there, and I've put some glossy accents and a ribbon that I made using the ribbon that came in the kit. It's a standard card, so I felt the video would be too long. I was going into over an hour, so hence the reason I've cut that card down. So now we're moving on to card 6, and it's a circle card, and I have used these dies that I got from AliExpress when I started crafting to die cut out my circles. Now I have a patterned paper, a white card, 2 gold card and 2 in grey. And these grey die cut circles, they measure 6.5 inches in diameter. So this is going to be bigger than a 6 by 6 card. This is going to be a 6.5 by 6.5 card. Okay, so on one of my die cut circles, I need to put a couple of score marks. And I'm going to put one score mark here, and this is at the 6-inch mark. This little tab is where we're going to stick the back onto the front, and I'm also going to put one at 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to cut this 1/4 of an inch off, and this is going to help our card to stand, because there's nothing worse than having a round card that doesn't know how to stand up straight. So I'm carefully going to cut that little 1/4 of an inch off the base of my card, and that way then once I stand it up, it'll stand up nice and straight. You can see the little tab there that I'd folded back. I'll put some glue on that and then stick that to the front, and then we'll have our card base, a circle card base. Isn't that grand? Perfect, I love it. Okay, so the next thing we need to look at is our 2 gold mats. And these two, I'm going to have one on the front and I'm going to have one on the inside. And this die cuts out a 5 7/8 width diameter. Then my pattern paper and the white one, I've die cut out those as well. Now the white one will have a little sentiment inside, as well as a piece of the ephemera down at the bottom. I've taken the letter H and I have die cut that out with a smaller die. Now, because it's a rectangular shape, I've got a straight edge on the right and a straight edge on the left. So I'm going to cover that up with, again, some of the lovely ephemera that came in the kit. My H is going to be for happy. So I've stamped out the happy and the birthday. That was a sentiment that came in the kit. I cut them apart once I had them stamped, and then I cut the H off the happy, because the H on my vellum piece is going to be the H in our happy sentiment. And I'm going to put them on the card sort of in this arrangement. That other ephemera piece will go on the inside of our card at the bottom. So I've sped everything up now and we're going to assemble everything. I'm going to trim off the top of this gold piece because I don't want it to be where our little tab is that we're going to stick to the front of our card. So I've just trimmed that off using the trimmer, and I'm going to stick that down now using some liquid glue. I find I use liquid glue more than I will a tape. The reason for that is there's a little bit of wiggle room, or it'll allow for a little bit of movement when I'm sticking things down, because I have an awful habit of getting things wonky. So there we go. So that's the front stuck to the back. Now we just need to do our H. Now I've showed you there, I took a Sharpie, and on the back of that vellum piece I went over the letter H. I wanted it to be darker and, you know, it to be seen better. So that's why I did that. I've glued it down and I've put my glue behind the H letter and the leaves and flowers on that vellum. So that's stuck down now. I just add a little bit on there. And now we can take our little pieces of ephemera. The piece on the right, I'm going to stick that down directly using some glue. But the piece that I'm going to put on the left to cover up that sharp edge, or the, you know, the blunt edge there, I'm going to put a piece of ephemera on that, but I'm going to put some foam tape on it. I've got a little bit of foam tape on my happy birthday, and I'm going to do my best to make sure they're on straight. I'm going to stick down then this piece of ephemera to the left, and then put down my little piece of ephemera inside. And later on, I can put a sentiment inside there, depending on who the card is going to. Lovely, delighted with that. So now all we need to do is embellish it, and to do that I'm going to use some gold sequins. I put some glossy accents over the H, and that'll be our circle card, our happy birthday circle card. And now we're moving on to card number 7. This is an inside out card and it's inspired by Sam from Mixed Up Crafts. Okay, so I have 2 pink card sheets, and these are going to be for my card base. These two sheets, they measure 6.5 by 6, and on the long side, at the 6.5-inch side, I've scored it at 6, and that'll give us this tab there at the top of a 1/2 inch. So I also have some patterned paper and some white card as well. So I have 3 cards by 5 3/4 by 5 3/4, one patterned paper 5 3/4 by 5 3/4. I have 3 patterned papers and one white at 5.5 by 5.5, and I have 2 strips at 1/4 inch by 5 3/4. I've stamped this yay and it's your birthday, and I'm going to fussy cut them out, and I've used a verse from Card Making Magic for my sentiment. These 2 pattern paper strips are offcuts, and they're 1/4 inch by 5 3/4. I've made up a little bow. I've taken a piece of acetate, and the acetate is 1.5 inches thick or wide, and it's just a long piece. I'll cut that down. Okay, so I'm just deciding where I want my ephemera and my pop-up parts of my card, and these are floating. Because they're on acetate, they'll just look like as if they're floating in the air. So our card is going to be a 6 by 6 card. So all these pieces that we're putting in, that'll be stuck down behind our little 1/2 inch piece there, you want to make sure it doesn't come above 12 inches. So on our little, you can just see there when we scored our card at 6, it gave us this little piece here along the top of a 1/2 inch. And I'm going to put some of my red liner tape on that, one on this one and some on the other one. I've also got my piece of acetate with a little bit of red liner tape on that. So the next thing I want to do is I want to put my acetate for my center focal point and for my little flower pieces on the right and left. You want to make sure that they don't poke out the sides when your card is closed. So keep an eye out where you're putting them. Make sure they're inside the area of your 6 by 6 card. So I'm just looking there at where I want them and how they want them positioned. I'm sorry it's a little bit off screen. I didn't realize when I was doing this. Okay, so now I want to remove the red liner tape on my card and stick down my acetate. And I'm also going to bring my 2 card bases together. I've stuck my panels onto these card bases, and I'm going to show you in what order I have stuck them down. So I'm pinching together the tabs that was at the top of the 2 pink panels, and that's where I have the red liner tape. So I have my yay and my it's your birthday stuck onto the acetate, and I'm putting my 2 little flower ephemeras on the right and on the left, and I want to make sure that those do not come out past the edge of the card when the card is closed over. So be very careful that you keep your pieces in. And I'm just having a look there and deciding where I'm going to put the top ephemera. So this is how your card should look. This is my front panel with the happy birthday. On the back of that is my panel with my verse, my happy birthday verse. So that's the front and that's the back. And as it opens, our piece pops up. Then we have a panel there. This I've left so I can at a later date put a name and an age or whatever on the front there. On the back of that then would be where you would put stamped, you know, handmade by or whatever. So that is our inside out card. Card 8 is a Peekaboo card, and this is a 5 by 7 card. You're going to need 3 panels or 3 bases, and this white panel measures 5 by 7 1/4, and I've scored it at 7. Then we have our center or our middle panel. So this piece measures 5 by 11, and I've scored it at 5.5. And I have a piece of pattern paper that's going to go inside there. This piece of pattern paper measures 4 3/4 by 5 1/4, and it'll sit on our card on this base like so. So then we have the front panel. On the front of our panel, this piece will measure 5 by 10 and 5/8, and we're going to score it on the long side at 7. For my patterned paper on the front, I've taken a piece of the 6 by 6 card and I've added on an extra 3/4 of an inch piece onto that. And that way, this little piece added on to the 6-inch piece will give us the 6 3/4 by 4 3/4 that we need. And I have stuck that together at the back and I've put a peel off down the center there. I have this off cut as well, and it's 3/4 of an inch by 4 3/4, and that'll go on the back of the card to embellish it. I also have used 2 circle dies that I have in my stash, and I have used these nesting dies to make 2 frames. The frame is 1/4 of an inch wide, and I'm going to take the smaller die and I'm going to use that to die cut out 2 holes into our card base. I've die cut out a happy birthday using a die from my stash, and I'm using one of the vellum letters that came in the kit. Okay, so let's speed everything up and stick everything together. So this is our patterned paper that we're going to put on the front of our panel, and you need to make sure that you get glue all over this panel because we're going to die cut out of it, and the same with our middle panel. We want to make sure that there's glue all over the pattern paper so that when we die cut it out, there's no parts left with no glue underneath it. So once they're all stuck down, I'm going to give them a little minute to actually set before I then go and use my dies. So I've taken my smaller die and I want to die cut out a circle on the front of our card panel. Once I've that done, I'm going to take our middle panel, which I've closed, and I'm going to put the die back into place on the front one, run it through my die cutting machine, and you'll see there that it'll cut through the first panel on our middle piece, but it doesn't cut out the back, but it's left an embossed area on it, so I can just fit the die back on there like a puzzle piece and then die cut out that panel. So we have die cut out the front of our card and we have die cut out the center part of our card. Now I'm going to take some 1/4 inch, this is like red liner tape, but it's in blue. It's a very strong tape, and I'm putting that on our little piece there on our back panel. Now I want to glue the center part to the front part because this card comes in 3 pieces that we put together. So I'm lining up the die cuts. You can see there the whole thing is lining up, and then the back piece will then stick onto our back panel. So I'm going to take off the liner tape and I'm going to stick this on, and this is being stuck onto the center panel. And I need to be over it so I can make sure that that is on correctly. Use a bit of pressure. So there you can see now we have our 3 panels making 1 card, and when you open the front it slides in behind, and you'll see it better once we have our patterned papers and everything in there. So this is the vellum piece. I've put some red liner tape around that, and it's a 1/4 inch red liner tape. I'm going to take the release paper off this. I've trimmed it down in size. I've taken about 1/2 inch off the top. I'm going to put it into position there. I'm lining it up, making sure that it's situated in the die cut area properly. Now you can see the edge of the left hand side there where it ends, and I'm going to just cover that up with a piece of ephemera, and I'll stick that down using some wet glue. So when the card is closed, you won't be able to see where the edge of the vellum is. Now I'm taking a piece of 1/4 inch red liner tape and I'm putting it down next to the score line there in the middle. And this is going to help our card to sit properly and open and close properly. Perfect. So now when you close the card, you see this letter D, and when you open the card, our panel is going to go in front of that letter D. So before I stamp down a sentiment that I want to go in there, I'm going to add my little circle frames. And again, I'm using some wet glue for that. So I've jumped ahead now. I've stamped a sentiment on the back of my card. I've put down a piece of ephemera on the back of my card. And I've also stamped my sentiment on my floating panel that'll cover up the letter. I'm just going to embellish the front of the card. And then when I open it up, you'll see where I have stamped the inside sentiment. So when you open the card, our little panel there has got a stamped sentiment and a piece of ephemera at the bottom. And you can put anything on there, you know, depending on what your card is for or who it's for. But that is our Peekaboo card. Next, we're moving on to card number 9, and this is a Corner Easel card. I have a piece of 12 by 12 card here, and I'm scoring it at 6 inches. I'm rotating the card and I'm scoring it again at 6 inches. Then what I want to do is I want to put 2 more score lines on it, but I want them to come from the center point in our panel to the bottom right hand corner and the bottom left hand corner. So to do that, I'm going to take a ruler and I'm going to put my little scoring tool in the very corner of our 12 by 12 sheet. And I'm going to score down to the very bottom right hand corner. And I'm going to do that again from the very center down to the left bottom corner. Perfect. So now we have these score lines. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to fold and burnish the score lines. And the reason I do this next instead of cutting is I find it helps me to cut the card better. Sometimes it can be hard to see in the light, you know, where your score line is and where you're cutting. So I just find this is a tip that I do. I find this helps me. So once we have our 12 by 12 sheet scored and burnished on those 6-inch score lines, I'm going to cut up this 6-inch score line, and you can see there on the right we have that other score line going off at the angle, and the same on the left. So I'm going to fold it over now and I'm going to show you. There we go. Our right hand side is going to fold over our left hand side. Now we want to fold and burnish these angle scores. So I've sped everything up now and I'm going to show you then how I just fold over those score lines and burnish them. So I'm pressing down on the score line, and once I have it into shape, then I fold it down and use my burnishing tool, my bone folder. Okay, so I'm just going to burnish that center score line and fold these over. So with this folded over piece, this is going to allow us to close our card by having these like that. And you can see the card folds relatively flat. It just depends now on what we put inside. And I'm going to use some foam tape liberally. So I'm going to make an envelope for this card when I'm finished. But there we go. Now we have our score line down the center, and that's how our card is going to close up. So I'm putting some glue down, and I'm using the Kalal glue because this dries really rock hard, and it'll be good and strong when it's dried. I'm not putting any glue on or next to the score line because I want my card to be able to close and open easily. So I've just put my glue to the right hand and the left hand side of the score line. I'm making sure all the edges as well are glued down. Okay, so now we have 4 silver card panels measuring 5 3/4 by 5 3/4. I have this white card measuring 5 1/2 by 5 1/2, with my stamped sentiment, and I have 3 patterned papers measuring 5.5 by 5.5 as well. My happy birthday sentiment is on a silver card 4 5/8 by 3 inches, and the white is 4 3/8 by 2 3/4. And I'm just showing you there the stamps I've used. So one of my silver cards, this silver card measures 5.5 by 5.5, and I've cut it on the diagonal. And I have some patterned paper here. This measures 5 by 5, and again I've cut that on the diagonal. And these are going to sit here at the base on the bottom of our card. Okay, so let's go ahead and have a look at our easel card. I've made a basic easel card using a circle die, and I have this folded over. My large die is 4-inch diameter. My medium die cuts out a 3.5-inch diameter, and then the next one down from that. I've stamped the happy birthday using the stamp in the kit, and I've matte and layered it on some silver card. So that'll be the stopper for the easel part of our card. So I'm going to stick those down now. Once my little easel card is assembled, I'm going to go ahead then and stick down all the mats and layers for the corner base card itself. Just make sure that that's straight. And there's our little circle easel. Okay, so I have my mats and layers stuck onto the card. So I have the silver matte layer down on one side, and then on this right hand side I have the matte and the paper stuck down. The reason I didn't stick the patterned paper down is because I need to put my easel part down, and I only want glue on the right hand side of my easel card base. On the left hand side I'm going to use magnets. One will go onto the base of the easel card, and the other one will go onto the base of the actual card itself. And the one that's going onto the actual card itself, that little magnet will be hidden underneath the patterned paper. So I'll put one little magnet on the left hand side of my circular easel card, and the other one will be on the left hand card of the card base. So I'm just covering that up now with my pattern paper, so when you open the card you won't see there's a magnet there. But when my easel gets stuck down, you can see there, once that's stuck down, the little magnet on the easel part will attach to the one on the card base, and that way it's hidden. Now you could use Velcro dots. Stick a Velcro dot on the patterned paper and stick one under the little easel card there, and that way you can push down on that. Some people don't like to use magnets because when the card gets thrown away, the magnets get thrown away as well. But I think the finish with the little magnets is cleaner looking, but that's preference, so you can use whatever you like. But there you go, that is our card number 9, which is our corner easel card, and it folds up nicely. There's a bit of bulk there, so I'll make an envelope for it myself, and there's loads of tutorials for envelopes and box envelopes on YouTube. So now we're moving on to our final card, card number 10, and this is what I'm calling an inside panel card. So I have a card base here of 12 by 6, and I scored it at 6. And I'm going to put a mat and layer on the front of this. So I have a white piece of card, and this measures 5 3/4 by 5 3/4. On top of that, I'm going to put a piece of patterned paper, and it's 5.5 by 5.5. Then inside I have 2 pieces of patterned paper, and I've made this myself. I've stamped this using some ink, some Toffee Crunch Memento ink for these 2 panels. And these are cut down to 5.5 by 5.5, as well as this white panel on the back. So on top of that then I have this long panel which measures 12 by 3, and I scored it at 3, 6 and 9. And when the card closes up you won't see that inside. I've cut 4 of these patterned paper panels, which are 2 3/4 by 2 3/4, and I've put some ephemera on them. I have 2 strips of brown and patterned paper, 5.5 by 3/4 and 5.25 by 1/2. And then I have this strip here across the bottom on the outside. It's 5 3/4 by 1 inch and 5.5 by 3/4 of an inch. And I've die cut out a lovely little happy birthday to go on the front. And most of my cards are happy birthday cards because that's what I use most. So I just find it's easier to make happy birthday cards. Okay, so I've stuck down my 2 patterned papers that I have made myself inside. Now, put your panels on this strip before you stick this in like I do. I'm sticking this down now, but I found when I came to put my little panels onto that, it was a little bit awkward. So I'd recommend you put your little panels on that strip and then stick that down inside. Okay, so I have my patterned paper. I'm going to stick that down onto my white matte layer, and then I'm going to stick that down onto the front of our card. Once I've that down, then I'm going to stick down the happy birthday die cut, and I love this little happy birthday die cut that I'm using. I've used it a couple of times on the cards that I've made. It's one that I bought in the works about 1.5 or 2 years ago. It was very cheap and it's a great little die. I'm really pleased with it. So I'm going to put some liquid glue. I'm going to dot it all around the die cut sentiment, and then I'm going to pop that down in the middle of the card at the front. Perfect. Put a little bit of weight on top of that just to make sure that it sticks down nicely. Now I'm going to put this decorative panel onto my sentiment panel and stick that down onto the back. And I just found that I have more room to write a sentiment, you know, to and from, and, you know, a few words if I want on the card, rather than trying to do it on the inside of the card. And I want the inside of the card just to be this lovely handmade pattern paper using all the lovely stamps that came in the kit, all the flowers and leaves, and I just think it's lovely. So there we go. Now we're going to stick the 2 little strips on the inside. And those panels, you could always die cut out, you know, letters for a person's name or images or whatever on the card that you like. So I debated putting a little ribbon on the front and I went against it. I thought, no, I'm going to embellish it with some of the enamel sparkling dots. I'll take my Spectrum Noir Sparkle Pen and go over the die cut happy birthday. I'm going to put a few of the enamel dots inside as well. And I'll put a couple on the strip on the back on the outside. And there we go. There's our 10 cards. We're at 48 minutes. Whew. But I have to say I enjoyed making these cards. I love making cards that are different. You know, I'm inspired by a load of card makers on YouTube, especially Sam from Mixed Up Crafts. Dawn from Dawn Stamping Thoughts is another one, and there's loads of other people that have inspired the cards, but the cards that are inspired by someone in particular, I will leave links to their cards down below. So I'd like to thank you for watching my video. If you've got this far, if you've enjoyed it, please click on the like button down below. If you're a subscriber, thanks for subscribing, and if not, you might consider clicking on the subscribe button down below as well. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And until next time, thanks for watching and bye-bye.